Joining us on the EntitlementsDestroyLives.com guest hotline this morning, and I find it interesting. This last weekend, we had Professor Robert George on, one of his co-commissioner on. Now, let me get the title right. It is the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. A good friend of the program, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Dr. Jasser, welcome back to Joe Thomas in the Morning. How are you today?
Great. It's good to be with you again, Joe. Thanks for having me back.
And Dr. George speaks highly of being sitting with you as newly appointed heads of this commission, and of course, author of the Battle for the Soul of Islam, and the founder and chair of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. Egypt, embroiled in so many different things, but I think one of the most compelling discussions right now, and amongst all of the violence that's going on both back and forth between the deposed Muslim Brotherhood and now the military leaders talking about releasing Hosni Mubarak from jail and I guess commuting his sentences and such, is the question that they are talking about banning the existence, outlawing the existence of the Muslim Brotherhood. And there are many people in this country who would say, yeah, that's a great idea, but can a country that believes in free speech and all the things that the United States believes in, how do we reconcile supporting a government that will ban an entire population of people or outlaw their beliefs? How do we walk that tightrope, Dr. Jasser?
Well, I think this is a very important question, is will this military be seeking a true transition towards democracy, or have they now rebooted and reset right back to the pre-2011 revolution, which is really what the signal of releasing Mubarak does. And I will tell you, I'll get to the freedom of speech issue in a second, but banning the Brotherhood doesn't work. They became 20% of the population by being banned, by being persecuted, and having their leaders hung in the streets, and Mubarak would ban them for a few years, and then he'd notice that they were 20% of the parliament just by virtue of people belonging to them but not identifying with the Brotherhood, but identifying by other masked ideologies. So, this is the issue. If you want to defeat what 60 years of Sadat, Nasser before him, and then Mubarak after him could not do, 1 year of the Brotherhood in open-spaced Egypt marketplace of ideas defeated them soundly more than anything did before. Now, having said that, if you have an ideology that's promoting violence, calling for the destruction of churches and Christian businesses and youth centers and on, that cannot be legal. Society cannot survive with an organization that declares violence. The problem is the Brotherhood is a large, diverse organization with militants that include such as groups like that offshooted into Hamas, and within Egypt, Islamic, Jamaat Islamiyya and others that are more militant jihadists. So really what Egypt needs to start saying is not to ban the Brotherhood, but ban any groups that advocate violence. But you cannot defeat groups that you outlaw. And ultimately, if they are truly going to be saying that they're displacing the Brotherhood, they removed Morsi, which I thought was a good course correction because he was not democratic at all. He did, as you and I have discussed, many things that were quite undemocratic, and he was rightly removed. But they cannot be imprisoning these folks if they think they're going to get credibility of the masses that rose up first against Mubarak and then against Morsi.
Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, you find him online, AIFdemocracy.org or mzuhdijasser.com as well. His book is Battle for the Soul of Islam. Dr. Jasser, so as Lincoln said, sometimes the best way to defeat an unjust law is to have it enforced vigorously. The biggest weapon against the Muslim Brotherhood was actually having them in power and exposing all these things that up till now had been theoretical about what would happen with an Islamic theocracy in charge of a country, is what you're saying, I gather, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And the strategy should be to, say that we're going to support the military. Already we've put most of our aid out in 2013, so this threat of cutting off aid is a bit false because it would be talking about 2014 aid. And yes, we should have benchmarks of democracy and start helping them build new political institutions. And these are all very important things to do. But the lever of pulling aid is something you can only do once. Just like Al Baradei resigned from being vice president because he saw what the military was doing to people in the streets in the past few weeks. And you can only do that once, and now he's irrelevant. He should have stayed on board. He should have declared that he would try to push back against the military and push forth the will of the people. But now he's irrelevant, and I found that to be an act of cowardice. So the U.S. needs to be very measured in the approaches we take in the next few weeks as Egypt's chaos settles out, and they try to stop themselves from devolving into a civil war.
Talk about the impact, on, and one of the reasons, ever since the first time we met you, Dr. Jasser, on the program, is to talk about the majority of the Muslim population who just sees the Islamic faith as a faith, the same way an Episcopalian does, and is not a militant organization or seeking world domination or any other things that are attached to the militant Islamists, as you say. So how is all this turmoil in Egypt affecting that community, that which you speak so eloquently for in your book, The Battle for the Soul of Islam, as well as at the American Islamic Forum for Democracy?
Well, I think the most illustrative thing was the charge we all felt when we saw 5 to 10 million Egyptians, almost 20% of their population, rising up against the Muslim Brotherhood. And those were mostly Muslims that said they didn't want theocracy. And we started to feel that maybe Muslims could start to demonstrate that we can thread that needle of democracy between the old National Socialists of the Mubarak era and versus the theocrats, and that we aren't, our motherlands aren't destined to be stuck with one form of autocracy or theocracy forever. And now we see, as this battle plays out, the dialogue in America has been that, we have to pick the lesser of two evils, and somewhat that's true moving forward, but there should be a goal for that, and most Muslims I know want to see us choose neither and help pick the voice of the people, and most Muslims that are here came here because this was the only country that gave us the freedom to practice our faith freely and step away from that vortex of different fascisms. Mm-hmm. So, we're praying that Egypt will not choose simply between those two and begin to find a new future for it. And many Muslims are just heartbroken by the churches that they see being burned by the Brotherhood and just the sectarian violence that's being done in the name of our faith.
Is the 800-pound gorilla in the room in this, and certainly there are other countries in the Middle East where there are equally bad things happening, but they don't have the Suez Canal. Is the presence of the Suez Canal make Egypt, above all others, the center square in this battle in the Middle East?
Well, that is certainly one of the pivotal points of why not to pull back the aid quickly. You start to compromise, for example, the military is what's maintaining the peace with Israel. And that should be part of the calculation because you can destabilize the region, not only internally within Egypt. So the stability of Suez, also we saw some of the violence was not only in Cairo and Alexandria, but in the city of Suez. And, that is a region we saw some militant groups trying to stoke violence against Israel, and Israel had to, or somebody, we don't know who exactly, whether it was the Egyptian military or Israel, took out a few terrorists last week. Sort of quietly in the Suez area. So, these things have to be addressed, and that has to be at the top of the list of the calculation. But, one of the chapters in my book is called Changing the Paradigm. And I think in the long term, you can look at short-term Israeli security versus long-term Israeli security. And long-term Israeli security will be much better served by the transition away from these sluggish, kleptocratic dictatorships towards democracies, because the era of Mubarak is what produced the environment in which the Muslim Brotherhood thrived and these militants were created and tilled on that soil. So that environment eventually needs to change. It's not going to be easy, and it could be bloody, but it needs to change if we're going to have a sincere Israel in that region.
Dr. Jasser, thank you so much for joining us this morning on Joe Thomas in the Morning. Again, the book is Battle for the Soul of Islam. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Anytime. You too, Joe. Thank you.